Have you ever heard of a kind of dark talisman made from a newborn's placenta? It's not a myth, not some story woven by superstitious folks, but a real curse that exists in old, forgotten villages, where shadows stretch longer than light, and whispers are more haunting than temple bells on a full moon night. In a remote land called Truong Giang, people still whisper about an old midwife who lives alone at the edge of the village. Her face is twisted, as if someone once tore it apart out of hatred. Her voice raspy, and her eyes never look anyone in the eye. They call her Bà Sấu Hen. No one knows her real name. All they know is that whenever she visits a household with a newborn, something strange always follows. A baby just days old would suddenly run a high fever, turn pale, and die. A healthy mother would drop dead in the middle of the night, blood pouring endlessly from her nose. And the strangest part? She always asked to keep the placenta, saying it was to bury for the child's health in the future. But rumors spread, she was keeping the placentas to craft dark magic. Blood talismans, the kind that only become powerful when soaked in the blood of 3 generations. Villagers were terrified, but no one dared confront her, because those who spoke ill of her ended up cursed. Some went insane, some disappeared, some saw a baby crawling across their yard in the middle of the night. And by morning, their house had burned to ashes. I was just a young teacher from the city, sent to Truong Giang to work, and at first, I dismissed these tales as nothing but old superstition. But on my very first night in the small house I rented by the edge of the forest, I heard babies crying, not 1, but 3, 4, even 5 babies, crying one after another, their sobs echoing through the stillness of night. I stepped outside, looked around, but no one was there. Yet the cries kept coming, from the abandoned house across the fence. The house of Bà Sấu Hen. And from that moment on, I knew I had stepped into a place not everyone dares to walk away from. What I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's the confession of someone who witnessed it firsthand, a blood curse that still lives. I received my teaching assignment just a few weeks after graduating. The place I was sent to was a small commune in a riverside district called Truong Giang. When I read the name, it felt strangely familiar, like something my grandmother had once mentioned when I was a child. About a place where people practiced dark rituals using placentas, where corpses were found completely drained of blood without a single tear in the skin. I laughed it off back then, thinking she was just trying to scare kids. But the moment my feet touched that land, I understood, there are places where darkness doesn't wait for nightfall. The bus dropped me off at a small market stop. As I stepped down, the smell of fresh mud and river fish hit me all at once. The bus assistant gave me a short warning: now that you're here, don't ask anything about old Sal. Alright? Before I could respond, he had already climbed back into the vehicle, shut the door, and the bus drove off, leaving me under the blazing noon sun with a backpack and a printed map in hand. The school arranged for me to stay temporarily in an old house about 500 meters from campus, near the edge of a bamboo forest and close to a small canal. Mrs. Tu, head of the neighborhood committee, walked me there. Along the way, she whispered, "Just try to last a few days. Then we'll figure it out. This house used to belong to Mr. Fu, the former principal. He moved away, and it's been empty ever since. The house is, well, let's just say sometimes you hear things at night, anyway. You'll see." I gave her a polite laugh, thinking it was probably just rats or stray cats. That evening, after I finished cleaning up, I sat on the front porch, watching the last rays of the sun melt behind the bamboo. A sudden cold breeze swept across the back of my neck, making me shiver. The air felt odd, quiet, but as if something was lurking nearby, watching. I turned to Mrs. Tu and asked who lived in the house next door. She shook her head and lowered her voice. "Don't look, that's old Sal's house. Don't ask, don't stare, don't go near it." I asked again, "Sal who? That old woman with the hunchback?" She didn't answer. She just pulled me inside and left. That first night in Truong Giang, I couldn't sleep. The wind whistled endlessly through the thatched roof, and the damp, earthy smell filled the air. At exactly 1:13 a.m., I heard something. It sounded like a child crying from beyond the fence. At first, it was just soft whimpering. Then it grew louder, clearer, like a newborn crying for milk. I jumped up and ran to the window. Darkness lay ahead, but the sound was unmistakable, the slow, choking sobs of an infant, echoing endlessly. The cries were coming from that leaf-roofed house next door, the home of Bà Sấu Hen. The next morning, I asked the students in class, "Who is Bà Sấu Hen?" The room fell silent. Every child lowered their head. One girl named Hen, sharp and brave, quietly tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Teacher, don't say her name out loud. They say if you call her name at noon, she'll follow you." I asked again, and she whispered, "She's a midwife, but everyone she delivers, something bad happens later." Still skeptical, I went to ask the village caretaker, an old man named Ba Lan, almost 80 years old but still spry. When I mentioned her name, his face turned pale. He whispered, "She's not human, son." Back then, the whole village tried to drive her away after 3 babies died shortly after she delivered them. But everyone who joined, something happened to them. Some went deaf, some blind, some vanished without a trace. That night, I sneaked around to the back of Bà Sấu house. The doors were shut tight. The place was pitch black. But I swear I heard whispering, and a faint metallic scent. Like blood, wafting from the woven walls. Hanging on the door was a faded red cloth. And in its center, something was stitched, no bigger than a hand. My heart stopped when I realized what it was. A shriveled, dried placenta. I ran back to my room, my mind in chaos. Questions flooded in. Why was she keeping placentas? Why did I hear children crying every night? And why was the entire village so silent? Like they were all trying to forget something too horrifying to face? On the 3rd day in Truong Giang, something happened that shook the entire village. Mrs. Han, the wife of Mr. Phuong, a local police officer, had just given birth to her first child. The midwife was a nurse from the hospital, someone they knew, but Bà Sấu showed up anyway. No one called her. She came on her own. She said, "I'm just here to watch." But the moment she stepped inside, the newborn let out a piercing scream, then fell silent. And that night, the baby died. Rumors spread again. Some said Bà Sấu had looked at the baby with her left eye, red as blood. Others claimed she touched the baby's head. I didn't know what to believe. All I knew was that from that night on, I no longer heard babies crying in the dark. Instead, I heard the slow, lonely thudding of a wooden prayer block echoing from deep within the bamboo forest. I never believed in ghosts. But now, I'm starting to believe that some things can't be explained by logic. And here, in this place called Truong Giang, everything is only just beginning. The news that the firstborn son of Mr. Phuong, the local police officer, and his wife had died just hours after being born spread through Truong Giang village like wildfire. Everyone was whispering the same name, though no one dared say it aloud. Bà Sấu Hen. I witnessed the whole scene right in front of their house. The baby's body was carried out, wrapped in a white cloth, his face pale and bluish, eyes wide open, as if he never had the chance to understand what had just happened. His mother, Han, lay unconscious in the bedroom, her body cold to the touch, even though the doctor said there were no signs of hemorrhage or post-birth infection. Everything felt so strange that a chill ran down my spine. I saw Bà Sấu that day, standing silently on the edge of the yard, hands tightly clutching her worn brown tunic, not saying a word. Her eyes were closed, as if she were listening to something far away. Something faint, and something not of this world. I reached out to ask her something, but the moment I touched her shoulder, she turned and looked at me. I will never forget that look, sunken, bloodshot, and not human. After the funeral, people in the village began to look at me differently. Some said I was an outsider from the city who didn't know better and dared to speak to Bà Sấu. Others muttered, "He'll be followed soon." I brushed it off. But that night, I dreamed. A strange, vivid dream. I was walking through a pitch-dark house, where dried placentas hung from the ceiling like wind chimes. Every time I touched one, it fell, soft, soaked in fresh blood. A lullaby whispered in the air, eerie and bone-chilling. "Hush, little one, sleep tight. When you grow up, Mama will sell you for gold." I woke up drenched in sweat, and the collar of my shirt smelled like blood, as if someone had smeared it right on my neck. The next morning, Hen, the student who often brought me meals, handed me a small folded note. In shaky handwriting, it read, "Teacher, Bà Sấu is not evil. People are dying because of a curse. I want to tell you something, but not at school. Meet me at the Banyan Shrine tonight, 7 o'clock. I waited until the time came. The Banyan Shrine stood near the end of the canal, a place where only a few elders dared light incense these days. Hen arrived, hands trembling, face pale. She spoke softly, barely louder than a breath. "Teacher, do you know why they call her Sấu Hen?" I shook my head. Hen looked down at her feet, then whispered, "When she was young, she helped deliver a baby in the forest. The baby was born silent, unmoving but alive, eyes wide open, skin pale as death. The midwife with her ran away, saying it was a demon child, told her to bury it alive. But she didn't. She hid the baby. From that day on, she got sick, her face twisted, her breathing wheezy like asthma. That's why people called her Hen. They feared her and drove her away. But she came back." I asked, "And the baby?" Hen looked up, her eyes locked onto mine. "No one knows. Some say it died, some say it lived. But it's not human anymore." Her words sent chills down my spine. If that was true, then the death of that newborn boy, was it connected? I decided to dig deeper. The next day, I quietly visited the home of old Master Ba Lan, the eldest in the village and guardian of the ancestral hall. At first, he said nothing, but when I told him about my dream, the hanging placentas and the bloody lullaby, he suddenly gripped my hand. His eyes sank deep, as if hearing an old song return from the dead. "If you dreamed that, you've been called," he said. "Years ago, Bà Sấu did something unspeakable. She kept the placentas. Didn't bury or burn them. She dried them and wrote spells using blood. They say the demon child commands her. Those spells aren't blessings, they're marks. Anyone marked will eventually repay with blood. And each spell only works if the baby dies. You understand? The children's deaths are part of the ritual." I was stunned. What I once thought were just superstitions now made terrifying sense. I returned home with my mind spinning. But before I could sit down, I saw something on the table, a piece of paper. No one could have gotten in. I was sure I had locked the door. So who left it? The paper was wrinkled, the ink dark red like blood. One single line was written: "Do not interfere with the affairs of the dead, unless you wish to take their place in the grave." And beneath that line was a piece of dried placenta, small as a fingertip, tied with a red thread, placed neatly in the center of the note. I sat frozen in place, staring at the wrinkled piece of paper with blood-red handwriting and the tiny piece of dried placenta placed right in the center. The air inside the room felt thick, as if someone had just walked through and left a trail of cold clinging to every wall, every wooden crack. I tried to stay calm, tucked the paper and the strange object into my bag, and locked the door. But that night, I couldn't sleep. In a half-conscious haze between dream and waking, I saw myself standing in the middle of a bamboo forest. Beneath my feet were hundreds of red cloth bundles buried just beneath the surface, each one pulsing as if it were breathing. I bent down to pick one up, and the ground began to tremble. Tiny hands reached up from beneath the soil, grabbing tightly onto my ankles. I jolted awake and found my feet covered in mud. The next morning, I sought out Hen. She silently nodded when I told her about the dream. then led me to a low, damp patch of land behind Bà Sấu house, an area overgrown with wild, aging bamboo. When I was little, I once saw her come out here at midnight. Heen whispered. She was holding a hoe, bent over like she was burying something. I slowed my steps, scanning the ground, and sure enough, something was off. Between the thick bamboo roots were several sunken patches of soil where no grass grew, like the earth had recently been disturbed. I dug lightly at one spot. The soil was soft, recently turned, barely a hand deep. My fingers touched something squishy, tough like skin. I pulled it up. It was a red cloth bundle, moldy and dry. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a hardened piece of placenta, wrapped in a paper with faded brown writing that looked like dried blood. Not just one, but 3 of these bundles were found within a 4 square meter patch of earth. I wanted to bring them to the local authorities, but Heen panicked and grabbed my arm. If you hand them over, she'll know. She'll cast a summoning spell on you. It won't kill you right away, but slowly, you'll start seeing things no one else can. I froze, somewhere between superstition and reality. I no longer knew what to believe. We decided to bury everything back exactly as it was. I marked the spot with a small stone. As we left, I turned back one last time, and I swear, someone was standing behind the doorway of Bà Sấu house, silently watching. I couldn't see the face, but I knew it was her. Her eyes were locked on my hand, the one that had touched the blood talisman. That afternoon, while I was teaching, one of the students suddenly collapsed on her desk. Her name was Lynn, only 7 years old, normally full of life, now unconscious. Foam at the corners of her mouth. Panicked, I rushed her to the clinic with the school nurse. The doctor shook his head. No fever, no stomach pain, no trauma, but her eyes were pure white. No pupils. That evening, I visited Lynn's home. Her mother, in tears, told me, early this morning, she went out to the garden, said someone was calling her from the bamboo grove out back. When I found her, she was standing there, like sleepwalking, holding a piece of red cloth. I asked to see it. It looked exactly like the one I had unearthed, deep red, thin like old silk, and reeking of dried blood. I left Lynn's house with a heavy heart. In the darkness, the clacking of a wooden prayer block echoed once again. Somewhere in the direction of Bà Sấu home, each hollow knock struck deep in my chest, my heartbeat sinking with the sound. I decided to return to the bamboo grove once more, this time at midnight, armed with a flashlight and a scarf soaked in medicated oil to ward off evil spirits. I quietly crossed the muddy path to the marked area. When my beam swept across the ground, I gasped. 3 new patches of freshly dug earth. More talismans. Someone was still burying them. I didn't dare dig any further. But as I turned to leave, I saw something ahead, a small figure. A child, no legs. It floated, long hair covering its face, dressed in a white shirt stained with mud, and on its chest was a dark red circle embroidered into the fabric. It didn't cry, it just shook its head, slowly, as if warning me. I ran. When I glanced back, it had vanished, but behind me, in front of Bà Sấu house, I saw the flicker of a kerosene lamp being extinguished. The door creaked shut, followed by a gust of wind and a whisper in my ear that chilled me to the bone. You dug it up, now you must return it, in blood. I started losing sleep, not because of the sound of the prayer blocks at night, or the blood-soaked dreams, but because of a question that clung to my mind. Why is everyone staying silent? This village, Truong Giang, every person, every house, every shadow of a tree, seemed to know something, a secret, something dark, but everyone tried to avoid it, like if they just ignored it, maybe it would go away. But it didn't go away. It was there every night, in the wind rustling through the bamboo walls, in the flickering yellow oil lamp on Bà Sấu porch, and in the eyes of the children whenever that name was mentioned, never out loud. I decided to visit Old Man Ba Lan again. This time, I didn't beat around the bush. I placed 3 red cloth pieces I had secretly kept on the table, along with a dried placenta wrapped in an old banana leaf. He stared at them, said nothing, didn't touch, just poured a cup of rice wine, drank it in one go, and sighed. "This is something you shouldn't know," he said, "but if you're already involved, then listen carefully." I nodded. His eyes looked cloudy, as if covered in mist, and his voice turned low and slow, like he was digging up a memory buried deep inside his chest. 33 years ago, this village experienced something strange, something deadly. That year, the flood was brutal. The river overflowed, fields drowned, homes ruined, while the villagers were scrambling to survive. A young woman drifted in from somewhere else. No one knew her name. All we knew was that she was heavily pregnant, about to give birth. She was taken in by Bà Sấu, back then still a midwife, who let her stay in a small hut at the edge of the canal. One stormy night, the woman went into labor. Only Bà Sấu was with her. People say, when the baby was born, it didn't cry, didn't move, but its eyes were wide open, black as coal, with blood-red veins lining the whites. Bà Sấu held it in shock, but didn't abandon it. She hid it, and from that night on, strange things started happening in the village. I felt a chill. The story mirrored exactly what Heen had once told me. I asked, "What happened to the baby? Is it still alive?" Ba Lan looked out the window, his voice raspy. "Some say it didn't die, that she fed it with black chicken blood and placenta water. But when the villagers found out, they went mad. They didn't dare kill her, but they forced her to leave. The night before her expulsion, 3 houses caught fire. 3 children burned alive. No one could explain how. And the next morning, she was gone, vanished with the child. No one dared speak of it again." I sat in stunned silence. A cold, sharp feeling welled up in me, a gut instinct I couldn't shake. That child never left this village. It's still here, maybe someone I've already met, or maybe watching me right now, hidden in the crying of children at night, or the shifting shadows behind those woven walls. I asked him, if this is a ritual, what is its purpose? He slowly opened a drawer, pulling out an old notebook, its pages yellowed with age. The cover read, "Life Ritual Records, Master Fap Exa." Inside were faded, slanted lines written in brown ink, almost the color of dried blood. To open the demon's eye, it read, "Requires the blood of 3 generations, the mothers, the newborns, and the one who knows the truth." I flinched. Suddenly, it all came rushing back, the death of Thuong's baby, Han still unconscious, and me, the only one digging into this truth. That night, I didn't go home. I went into the bamboo forest. Alone, a crescent moon hung low in the sky, casting a cold, pale light. I returned to the spot where I had once dug up the talismans. I bent down, and couldn't believe my eyes. The stones I had placed to mark the ground had been moved. Someone had been here, and more than that, there was a fresh hole, barely covered. I crouched down, heart pounding. Inside, this time, there was no red cloth. Instead, a tiny doll made of glutinous rice powder. On its forehead, written in blood, was a single crude word, Truong. I stumbled backward, falling onto the ground, my back hitting the base of a bamboo stalk. Then, from the dark brush, I heard an old, raspy voice, not loud, but clear as day. "You shouldn't have dug it up. What's buried must stay buried. You stirred it, now it must be paid for, in blood." I whipped around. No one was there, but the metallic stench came rushing back, thick, overpowering, surrounding me. I turned on my flashlight, scanning the ground. The beam landed on a cloth spread over the soil, bright red, wet. Blood. I stepped toward it, but the light flickered, then went out, and this time, I heard it clearly. A lullaby, whispered, right behind me. "Sleep now, my child, sleep without fuss. Mama keeps your placenta, to brew a spell for 9 long years." I ran, never looked back, never stopped, and in the freezing wind that scraped down my spine, I swear I heard laughter, hoarse, choked, like the laughter of a mother who's lost her child, or a midwife who's lost her soul. I woke up on the morning of the 15th day of the 7th lunar month with a strange feeling. Not fatigue, not the lingering panic of yet another blood-soaked nightmare, but a stillness I couldn't explain, like the entire space around me was holding its breath. Every sound seemed to vanish. No roosters crowing, no motorbikes heading to the market, not even the usual rustling of bamboo leaves beside the porch. Everything stood still, as if time itself had bent and broken over Truong Giang. I stepped outside. The village was eerily quiet. Doors were shut tight. The few people I saw passed by with their heads down, silent. I asked Mrs. Tu, the neighbor, and she whispered, "Tonight is the blood moon. No living soul should be out after 9 p.m. Anyone who does, might not come back." I forced a smile, trying to ask more, but she simply shook her head and closed her door, leaving me alone on the empty dirt path. I told Heen what happened. Her face went pale. "You didn't know?" she asked. "Every 13 years, our village has a blood moon season. The last time, I was just a child. That night, 3 children disappeared. No blood, no screams, just their sandals, neatly placed at their doorsteps." A chill ran down my spine. The story old man Ba Lan told me came flooding back. 3 children burned to death the night before Bà Sấu was driven out of the village. Heen gripped my hand tightly. "Teacher, don't stay home alone tonight. If you hear crying, do not open the door. If you see flickering light outside, turn off all the lights and lie still. Don't even breathe loudly." I asked her why. She gave one short answer. "Because it's looking for someone to replace." The whole day, I moved around like a ghost. I burned the talismans I had dug up, sprinkled salt around the house, and hung garlic as Mrs. Tu had instructed. The sun went down fast, like it was pulled from the sky. The moon rose early, huge and blood red, like an eye watching from the other side of the world. I locked the doors from the inside, turned off all the electricity, and lit only one oil lamp. 9 p.m. silence pressed against the walls. I lay still, eyes shut, and then, the crying began. Faint at first, then closer. Then it stopped, right outside my door. I held my breath, fingernails scratched against the wooden door. Light, steady, as if carving hatred into every grain of wood. I clenched my jaw, didn't move. The scratching stopped. Then, a lullaby echoed. "Sleep, my child, sleep tight, so mama can keep your placenta, to brew revenge spells." I thought my heart had stopped. Outside, a glow appeared, like someone holding an oil lamp, walking slowly around my house. The light made a full circle, then stopped outside my bedroom window. A small figure appeared, hair hanging down, a tiny hand pressed against the glass. Motionless, unblinking, just staring. I stayed still until nearly dawn. Only when the first light broke through the window did I dare open the door. There was nothing outside, but on the ground, 2 tiny muddy footprints. Children's feet, stopping right at the doorstep, and vanishing into empty space, as if they'd never existed. Before I could process it all, a scream rang out from the end of the village. I ran. It was Ms. Nu, mother of Bao, one of my students. She was sobbing uncontrollably. "He was right here," she cried. "Slept next to me all night. But when I woke up, he was gone. The door was locked. No windows were opened, but he's gone. No sound, no sign." I went to Bao's room. On the bed was his favorite pajama shirt. On the wall, a faint, thread-thin line of blood ran from the bedpost to the floor, leading to the window, and in the middle of the front yard, lay a small handkerchief, embroidered with a red circle, and in the center, a dried-up piece of placenta, tied with black thread. Ms. Nu collapsed. The villagers began whispering again. "Bà Sấu, the talisman, the blood. I don't know what's real anymore. But I know this wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't superstition. This was something ancient, vengeful, relentless. And now, a door has been opened." The morning after Bao disappeared, the entire village of Truong Giang was covered in a thick, heavy atmosphere, as if someone had dusted every roof, every banana grove, every bamboo branch with a layer of poisonous mist. No adults dared let their children leave the house. No kids ran and played in the yards anymore. Mrs. Tu walked past my home and said just one sentence: "If someone knocks on your door tonight, don't answer." Even if the voice sounds familiar, I couldn't just sit still. In my mind, the scattered puzzle pieces, night cries, muddy footprints, the dried placenta, the flickering oil lamp, were all spinning around a single place: Bà Sấu Hen's house. I decided I would enter it, just once, to find out what she had been hiding behind that closed door all these years. When night fell, I waited until all lights in the village were out. The moon was full, pale, hanging in the sky like a bulging eye. I put on a dark jacket, carried a flashlight, a pinch of salt, and a bundle of dried incense tied with red thread. Mrs. Tu had said it was the only thing that could ward off wandering child spirits. Her house sat at the end of the lane, hidden behind dense bamboo. The door wasn't locked, just a red cloth tied loosely around the handle, like a warning to keep the living out. I stepped through. As my hand brushed the cloth, a chill shot through my wrist, deep into my bones, but I pushed the door open anyway. Inside was an old thatched hut, oddly clean, no dust, no cobwebs. Everything was meticulously arranged: bottles, dried herbs, old paper bundles. At the center of the house was a low altar, but instead of Buddha statues or ancestral tablets, there were 3 small tufts of children's hair, tied with red thread, placed on a cracked porcelain dish. I froze. I didn't dare shine the light too brightly. I moved along the wall, toward an old wooden cabinet. It wasn't locked. Inside, I found a black leather notebook, unmarked. I opened it. On the first page, in shaky red ink, it read, "Blood talismans, crafted from human placenta." My heart raced. The following pages were filled with strange symbols, charms and incantations, along with step-by-step instructions: how to harvest the placenta, how to mix it with black chicken blood, how to dry it using smoke from the bones of sacred children. And most chilling of all, each talisman had to include a sacrifice, either hair, fingernails, or the blood of the marked child. One section was written in large, erratic handwriting, as if in a trance: "One talisman, one soul. 3 souls, the door opens. When the door opens, the demon enters. Vengeance will be paid in blood. Life after life." I kept flipping. Near the middle of the book was a folded page, stained with dried blood. I carefully unfolded it. It was a list of village children, names, birth dates, and symbols. Bao, the boy who had just vanished, was marked with a red circle and the word, "completed." My hands shook. Not just Bao. There were other names I recognized. Kids from my class, others I'd seen at the market. This entire village was a cycle of ritual offerings. I closed the notebook and slid it into my backpack. But when I turned around, I froze. Standing at the center of the room, in front of the altar, was Bà Sấu. I didn't know how long she'd been there. Her face was shrouded in darkness, eyes sunken, glowing red. She didn't speak, didn't move. She simply raised one bony hand and pointed to my chest. Her voice rasped like wind through a bamboo flute. "You took it, now you must feed it. If you don't, it will eat you before it leaves." I bolted. As I burst through the door, a flashlight flickered at the end of the lane. It was Truong, the village policeman, running breathlessly toward me. When he saw me, he shouted, "Another child is missing." I clutched the backpack tightly and said nothing. Inside, Bà Sấu notebook was growing warm, as if fresh blood was seeping from its pages. I clutched my backpack and ran all the way from Bà Sấu house. In my mind, only 2 images remained: her glowing red eyes, and the notebook growing hotter by the second, as if blood was coursing through its pages. I didn't dare go home. Instead, I went to the Banyan Shrine, the only place where incense never stopped burning. The same place where Heen had once arranged to meet me. I sat on the cold stone floor, heart pounding in my chest, cold sweat soaking my back. Everything around me was eerily quiet. Only the wind passed through the banyan leaves, whistling like the sighs of spirits that had yet to move on. Around 1 in the morning, Heen appeared. She wore a plain white ao dai. Her face was bare, no makeup, and her eyes were sunken like someone who hadn't slept in days. She wasn't alone. In her hands, she carried something wrapped in red cloth. She didn't speak. She walked over, placed the wrapped object on the altar, and sat beside me. Only after a long silence did she finally speak. Her voice shaking like a heavy burden was being lifted. "Teacher, I can't hide it anymore. I'm the child from that night." I jolted, turning to look at her. Heen lifted her gaze, her eyes red and swollen. "Not Bà Sấu child. But I was born on the blood moon that year. The night the ritual was interrupted, and part of the demon's soul never left. I survived, but I'm not fully human." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her to explain, and she continued. "Bà Sấu raised me. I grew up without parents. The villagers said I was abandoned, but no one knew. I was the final link in that unfinished ritual. The curse remained incomplete because I lived. Every time the blood moon returns, the marked spirits come for me, because I'm the final key to open the door." I sat there speechless, all the scattered stories now pieced together like a stitched wound. The missing children, the dried placentas, the names in the notebook. It wasn't random. Each child who vanished was a sacrificed soul. But the ritual could only be completed if the one marked, Heen, offered her blood willingly. I asked, "Why are you telling me this? Aren't you afraid?" Heen looked at me, no longer trembling. "Because I'm tired, teacher. I don't want to carry this anymore. I want it to end. And I need you to help me stop the curse." I lowered my head, my thoughts twisted with doubt and fear. This student, whom I had once trusted, who'd earned my compassion, was now the root of a demonic ritual. I didn't know if I should save her or stay far. Far away, Heen slowly unwrapped the red cloth she had brought. Inside was a piece of white fabric, stained with dried blood, and on it, a name written in blood. "Truong." My blood ran cold. She whispered, "They've marked you already. If the ritual doesn't continue, the marked one dies." In my place, I stepped back, legs trembling. She bowed her head and said, "I don't want you to die. But if you're going to save me, you must burn all the talismans. Burn the notebook, and perform the reversal ritual at the place it all began, beneath the tamarind tree by the canal, where the first placenta was buried, before the next full moon. If we miss it, either you or I will no longer be human." I didn't know what night that would be. All I knew was, as Heen finished speaking, a violent gust blew through the shrine. The oil lamp on the altar flickered and died, and from somewhere beyond the trees came the faint sound of a lullaby from the canal. Cold, bone-deep cold, and that lullaby was calling my name. Just before dawn, I left the shrine. Sleep was no longer possible. By now, every shred of logic in my mind had unraveled. I could no longer tell what was real and what was superstition. But one thing I knew for certain. Everything began at one place, the old tamarind tree by the canal, where the first placenta talisman was buried, where the cursed child with half a demon's soul, Heen, was born. The sky brightened slowly, but the light in Truong Giang wasn't like anywhere else. It was ashen, like smoke and soot, as if even the sun was afraid to shine on a land that had been cursed for far too long. I slipped through the path behind Bà Sấu house, followed the bamboo grove, and reached the canal bank. The water was pitch black, eerily still. On the other side stood the ancient tamarind tree, its trunk covered in moss, so wide it would take 4 people to embrace it fully. The damp stench from its roots mixed with the sourness of wet mud made me want to vomit. I began to dig, The earth beneath the tree was hard as stone, but after about 3 hand lengths deep, I heard a soft clack. I stopped. Buried there was a small wooden box, tightly wrapped in layers of red cloth and beeswax. My heart pounded as I pulled it out. Carved into the wood, in jagged scratch marks like fingernails, was the word Heen. I pried open the lid. A foul stench hit me instantly. Inside was a dried piece of placenta, a tuft of a child's hair, and a tiny bone, no larger than that of a newborn's finger, each item carefully wrapped in a now brownish-white cloth. Among them, there was a folded letter. The paper was yellowed, brittle. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, faint, but unmistakably clear. I had no right to bring it into this world, but I didn't have the strength to kill it, either. It is human, only halfway. The other half belongs to somewhere else. If you're reading this, please end the ritual before it chooses a replacement. Every 13 years, blood must be repaid, and if it lives, death will never stop. I sat in shock at the base of the tree. The wind howled past, biting cold and sharp as needles. That child, Heen, was never given a choice. She was just an unfinished offering. And the ritual was never truly completed. That's why it keeps repeating. The blood of innocence had soaked into the soil of Truong Giang because someone, maybe a midwife, maybe a broken ritual, maybe a forbidden desire, once made a fatal mistake. I picked up the bone, preparing to burn it as Heen had asked, when a high-pitched, piercing laugh rang out behind me. I turned. On the far side of the canal stood Bà Sấu. No, it was something in her shape, but not her. Her eyes were milky white. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, reaching toward her ears. She didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at me. And behind her was Heen. She was tied with red thread, her face pale, head slumped forward. I screamed. No one answered. Bà Sấu raised a finger and pointed directly at me, then slowly began to smile. Her lips moved, and words slipped from them like fingernails scraping rotten wood. Don't burn it, or it will come out. And no one can stop it. I looked back down at the wooden box. The truth was all here. If I destroyed it, I could free Heen. But if I kept it, the ritual would choose me as its next vessel. And then, that lullaby returned. No longer from the distance. It was now, inside my head. Sleep, child. Hush now and sleep, so Mama can pass the curse through the body of the fool who dares to interfere. This year's Vu Lan festival arrived with a heaviness unlike anything before. From the early morning, the sky above Truong Giang village was a strange shade of gray. No rain, no sunlight, just a layer of ash blanketing every rooftop, every bamboo branch, every face. The scent of incense and the faint chime of the temple bell did nothing to warm the air. People locked their doors by noon, hung mirrors, pasted talismans on their gates. They didn't go to the temple. They didn't perform rituals in their yards. They didn't chant prayers. They just hid, because they knew, tonight, the door would open. I brought the wooden box back from the tamarind tree in complete silence. The bone, the lock of hair, the blood-stained letter, they were still in my backpack, untouched since I'd left the canal. Every time I reached for them, a sharp pain jabbed through my chest like a needle, my blood pulsing without reason. Something inside me was being drained. I thought of Heen. She was still bound, held somewhere by the very person who raised her, or rather, something wearing the shape of Bà Sấu. No longer human. I thought of the children who had disappeared. The brittle talismans wrapped in placenta, buried around the village, the villagers' eyes, filled with fear, but sealed in silence. I thought of the lullabies each night, echoing from the moment I arrived, all of it leading to one place. Tonight, at the village ancestral hall, the ritual would begin, and I was part of it. At exactly 11 p.m., I arrived at the hall. No one stopped me, no one watched. They knew, if they tried, they'd die. The hall was pitch black. The doors already open. On the altar, 3 incense sticks burned faintly. The only light came from a red oil lamp in the center of the room. Around me were ancestor statues, all draped in white cloth, white as funeral shrouds. I stepped in. The smell of blood was thick. On the floor, Heen lay bound, her hands tied, eyes closed. I rushed toward her when click, the door locked behind me. I spun around. Bà Sấu stood there, in her hand, a ceremonial knife, its blade pitch black, the hilt etched with strange Chinese characters. She said nothing. She walked forward, placed the knife on the floor, then looked at me with hollow eyes. Her voice came from somewhere far away, like a whisper through the void. The blood of the cursed, the bone of the replacement, the soul of the marked. Together, they opened the gate. I screamed, shoved her aside, pulled out the blood spell notebook, threw it to the ground, doused it in gasoline, and lit it. The fire exploded. She screamed, a high-pitched wail like a newborn crying, and vanished into smoke. But before I could catch my breath, the floor trembled. From beneath the tiles, blood gushed up through the cracks. The ancestor statues fell. The oil lamp flickered out. And in the darkness, a glowing door appeared, suspended in the air. Outlined in flame, trembling with ancient symbols. The lullaby filled the room again, not one voice, but many. Children, women, the elderly, all singing, all calling my name. I pulled Heen into my arms. She was awake now, lips pale, eyes glassy. She whispered, "You can't run, teacher, it chose you. Only when your blood touches my bone will the ritual end." I shook my head. No, I couldn't trade my life. But then the door flared, brighter than ever. A hand reached out from the darkness, massive, skeletal, stretching toward me. I lifted Heen, grabbed the box, pulled out the small bone, and I cut my hand, let the blood drip onto her bone. The moment my blood touched it, the door flashed one final time, then began to collapse inward, shrieking so loud it shattered the air. And then, it was gone. The hall fell into silence. The oil lamp flickered back to life. Heen collapsed into my arms. Bà Sấu, or whatever she had become, was nothing more than a charred shell clinging to the wall. Outside, a rooster crowed. The night was over, but I didn't feel relief. Because I knew the curse had been stopped. But that door was never truly closed. Morning had fully arrived as I helped Heen out of the ancestral hall. The early sunlight spilled across every bamboo bush, every dew-covered rooftop. Everything was unnaturally quiet. So quiet I began to wonder if the horrors of the previous night had just been a bad dream. But the blood-stained hands, the now empty wooden box, and the scorched mark on the temple floor said otherwise. It had all happened, and I had gone to the very end of a blood curse passed down through generations. Paid for with truth and blood. Heen was taken in by Mrs. Tu. She remained silent, as if waking from a long, haunted sleep. She didn't speak, just sat there, staring toward the canal, where the ancient tamarind tree still stood, silent witness to it all. I stayed behind, cleaning the ruins of the ancestral hall. My students no longer came to class. The villagers avoided me. No one said it aloud. But I knew I had stepped into something no one dared approach for decades. And that frightened them. A few days later, I decided to leave Truong Giang. Before leaving, I went to say goodbye to Heen. She had moved into a small house beside the Banyan Shrine, the place where she'd first met me. Heen gave me a faint smile when I walked in, but her eyes weren't the same. There was something different, hard to describe, as if part of her had never truly returned. I asked, "How are you feeling now?" She replied slowly, lighter, but hollow. "I don't hear the lullaby anymore. But every night I dream that I'm standing in front of a door. I'm too afraid to open it. But I know it's still there." I didn't speak. She handed me a small box wrapped in brown cloth. "This is yours," she said. I opened it. It was the ritual notebook, the one I had burned in the hall. But here it was, untouched, not a single scorch mark, perfectly intact. I turned to the first page. The ink was still red, but the first line had changed. When 3 souls return to the void, the 4th shall be chosen to guard the door. I looked up. Heen was staring at me, her eyes resting for a long moment on the scar across my wrist, the place where I had cut myself to let blood fall on her bone. She said softly, "No one ever said who the doorkeeper would be. Maybe it's the one who finished the ritual. Your blood touched the bone. Maybe." I clutched the notebook tighter. My throat tightened. A cold, quiet fear rose from the deepest part of me. That night, I boarded a bus out of Truong Giang. As it rolled across the narrow bridge at the edge of the village, I looked back one last time. Wind swept through the bamboo grove, and I saw Heen, standing alone by the canal. Her long hair loose, her white dress fluttering in the wind. She raised her hand and waved. But for a brief moment, I saw another figure behind her. Small, barefoot, no legs, hair covering its face, a tiny hand clutching her dress, like a child refusing to let go of its mother. I blinked. The bus had gone too far to see. Inside my backpack, the notebook shifted slightly, and I heard, faint but unmistakable, a lullaby whispering through the air, like wind brushing past my ear. "Sleep now, my child, sleep so deep. One day the door will open, and we'll find each other again." So the blood curse seemed to be over. But the doors once opened, do they ever truly shut? Some things are buried not to be hidden, but to wait for the day their name is called again. And sometimes, the one who survives carries the heaviest burden of all. If you've ever heard a lullaby in the middle of the night, or seen a flickering oil lamp in your dreams, be careful, because maybe the door is creaking open for you. Candle, thank you for listening to the complete story of Bà Sấu Hen, the placenta talisman and the blood curse. If you found it haunting and want more spine-chilling spiritual tales like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss the next chapter. We'll meet again when darkness falls. Ban ko kan min bien tap ton bo ton file lien mok de dung dung video hon chin kong?